So I did get around to watching the Nick Diaz documentary from Vice TV, and I gotta say it wasn't terrible, not at all. Before I even say anything, I want you to know I will be talking about this as if everyone has seen it. I know many people probably haven't, and some probably haven't even heard of it, but there will be spoilers, heavy spoilers, and I can't help it without really talking about it. So, for even further context, I am not the biggest fan of the Diaz brothers these days. I think I have mentioned that several times in previous videos and writings as well. I did a big piece on Nate Diaz on Substack that I think I'll go ahead and attach down in the description a few years back. But I was a fan of the Diaz brothers in a big way, a very big way. The Diaz brothers had a lot of stuff about them that I could relate to. Being a fan of kung fu movies and idolizing Bruce Lee, wanting to learn the nunchucks, and being like a black sheep of not only the school you go to, but your friends' circles. And me and my friends that I'm still friends with today, we grew up around plenty of guys like this. And I think some of us even had these types of phases where we were like them. And I guess that combined with, learning more about the Diaz brothers over time, and especially in this documentary specifically relating to Nick, it helps you see where they're coming from. I think they did an okay job of assembling the people to speak on Nick. It would have been a lot cooler if, what's his name, that ran Bellator, Scott Coker. It would have been cool if Scott Coker and maybe even Dana White spoke in this documentary. It would have been cool if Nate spoke in it. One thing that they didn't touch on, which I found a little bit odd, is they went from BJ Penn to George and skipped over Condit, and I don't understand really why. Maybe because a lot of people don't feel like Condit should have won. He did a lot of retreating in that fight, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm not looking it up, but Condit is in my top 5 all-time favorite as a fan. I just loved Carlos for everything he did. He's still around here in Albuquerque. I know he's training some people down on like 2nd or 4th Street at a kickboxing academy, or was at least 2 years ago. Hope he's doing good. But anyway, this covers the ascension of Nick Diaz through his pro career, really. It kind of skims over his high school days and how he got into martial arts altogether. It's more about the coaches explaining that portion of it. And if you know anything about the Diaz brothers, they are not the best at grasping the English language when it comes to public speaking, or in relation to public speaking. So maybe that's the reason why that's not explored as deep here. It's pretty interesting, the cuts that they have with Nick speaking himself. He seems sharp and more articulate than I've ever heard him talk. And I've been following Nick since the Gomi fight. I think that was in like Pride or Ryzen or something. I think it was Pride. And he got the Go-Go Plata, right? Yeah, that's what it was. So I've seen a lot of public interaction with Nick Diaz, and he don't talk this way. So my guess is that they did a lot of takes, editing, being very patient with letting him get out what he was trying to get out. But Nick always talks in this enigmatic way that you really got to be listening and know his past to understand what he actually means. For what they do cover though, it's pretty good. George gives his take on it about how tough and durable Nick was, and that's really all there is to it. The frustration he had that no matter how hard he hit him or what he hit him with, Nick just kept coming, and it's like we all knew that. So it's really glossing over what was, in my opinion, the most important fight in Nick's career. They kind of really didn't touch on BJ Penn a lot as far as the fight goes with Nick, and that's where Nick looked outstanding. Now you can say that was BJ about to be washed or on the verge of it or post prime, but Nick looked great in that fucking fight. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the purpose of the documentary is not to glorify the great fights, and I do understand that. It's to explore what makes Nick Diaz Nick Diaz, and that's when it starts getting really hard and you get a little bit emotional with it. Anyone who has experienced loss in their life can probably relate on that level, and there will be people that say, yeah, I relate, and then build this excuse up to like still show that they're manly and they don't cry or what have you. This is life, this is what happens. But until something like that happens to you, you don't know how it's going to affect you. And if you're one of the people that bury it, well, then you don't realize what it's doing to you. The story of Nick's first love is extremely sad, but it also explains why he is the way he is. I don't know if a lot of people will pick up on it, but while he's talking, Nick says, you know, you're dating the hottest girl in high school, and everyone wants that. They want a piece of you, right? They want to get him out of the way to get her. And it doesn't matter what she looked like or if she was indeed the hottest girl in high school, but that little footnote of him saying that, man, to him, she was the hottest girl in high school. She was everything. She was everything. And Nick was obviously mature beyond his age, because he was already self-aware back then. He explains it in this documentary. He was trying to hold on to something that he had good, but it wasn't working out with this girl who later ends up offing herself. And I don't have clarity on how it actually happened. Really, I don't want to know. It was some kind of freeway accident, but him going to see her after it had happened and laying down beside her, dude, that made Nick who he is today and who he would be for the rest of his life that day going forward. You don't go through something like that. You don't experience something like that and wake up the next day as the same person. It's a heartbreaking story. I mean, it's something that shouldn't never happen to somebody. And somehow it happens to this dude, and he pushes through in combat sports, and it even goes on to have more shitty situations in his life with the marijuana thing. And something that they touched on, I'm not going into details for everything. I definitely want you to watch this if you're an MMA fan. If you're young and you're tough, or you think girls are stupid, or just shut up and show me the fights, you gotta see the humanity in some of these fighters, especially someone like Nick Diaz. For what it's supposed to be, the documentary is engaging and it is interesting. There's a lot more that could be explored here, but if I had to bet money, knowing the Diaz brothers, they didn't want much more to be shared. It's why Nate's not here. Why would Nate not go on a documentary to talk about his brother? He loves his brother. I mean, he is the head general of the Nick Diaz army. You know what I'm saying? Jake Shields isn't on here. I was surprised Cesar Gracie came on to talk. I was very surprised that Nick said anything, to be honest with you. But for Caesar to come on, I think Nick and company kind of felt like this almost had to be done. Not only to get his story out, but to also probably get a payday, because they go on to say that stupid 5-year marijuana suspension Nick is still paying for, which is why he returned to fight Robbie Lawler in the fucking rematch, and he didn't look good at all. And I look at that, and I look at his upbringing, and I look at how talented he was, and I just don't understand how you can't feel for this guy or other fighters with these situations. Now, not every fighter has these types of dire, tough situations, but a lot of them do. Just shit that's unbelievable, and this story is ridiculous. On a more lighter note, the entertaining aspect, them covering, I believe it's Nick and Joe Riggs fighting in the hospital, and Riggs shitting himself, man. These guys were savages back in the day, dude. They were absolute savages. IVs in them. Can you imagine being in the hospital, IVs in you, and your op just rolls in, and he's in a wheelchair, broken everything, busted eyes and lips, and y'all get up and fight, dude. Like, that is some wild shit. Unreal. Very entertaining. It was cool to see Cesar Gracie. I think that Cesar did a lot for the Diaz brothers, and I respect the Gracie family a lot, obviously. But on a lighter note, I love the jacket Nick is wearing, but he didn't have to do white on white. He should have put a black shirt underneath, or a Metal Militia shirt, old school throwback. Nick may have to fight again, and I remember they had it for Vicente Luque, and we were all just like, oh, talking shit, don't do this, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes, man, these people are taking fights for other reasons outside of like, oh, I think I got a run in me. And it made me really look back and think about Tony Ferguson fighting as much as he did. You know, like, I talked a lot of shit when Tony Ferguson kept fighting. Maybe he's fighting because he has to, and not so much he wants to, and just uses that as a crutch to the public. And if he fights just because he wants to, you know, that's stupid. But my point is that, you know, these guys, We don't know what's behind the gloves until something like this comes out and they're willing to share it. And I don't think any of this is excuse making or fabricated. The Diaz brothers don't have any reason to lie. Cesar Gracie has no reason to lie. They're not involved with the UFC in this kind of way, like active profits or something. From what I can tell, it sounds like Nick is just trying to pull himself out of debt from the 5-year suspension that happened to him. The same one that took his ability away to fucking work. At least Vice got that point across. I just wish they would have put more information into it. I understand why they didn't, but overall, I think it's worth a watch. How many, 1 to 5, how many double middle fingers? How many birds flipped? 3.5 birds.
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfucker.